I'm thankful to the authorities of Rishihood University, especially the Center for Human Sciences, for being given this opportunity to be with you this evening and to share some of my observations regarding the beginning and development of Avadhana or the art of Avadhana, right from Vedic ages till we may say 16th, 17th century. Avadhana, as it is practiced nowadays, exactly in the same form, we may not find the practice of Avadhana thousands and thousands of years back in Vedic period, but the basic characteristic of Avadhana, concentration of mind and applying mind for some kind of exercise, some kind of creative activity, for education as well, for a play also. So all these characteristics of Avadhana are evinced in various practices which prevailed in Vedic period. I think we all understand that Avadhana involves a kind of a specific exercise within. And in the tradition, it is defined of two types, concentration within and search within. That also is an Avadhana, is a kind of Avadhana to reach a samadhi or spirituality, experience of spirituality, and applying your concentration in the outer world to observe it and to create structures out of that. That is another kind of Avadhana. So both these types of Avadhanas are in practice in Vedic period, we can say. And the purpose of the Avadhana, practice of Avadhana, is to preserve the knowledge systems, to attain emancipation by an individual, for our bliss, joy, ananda, as we say, and for education and entertainment also. So the whole history of Avadhana, as it is practiced from hoary past till recent times, I view it in 5 phases. The first phase runs from Vedic period. In Vedic period, you may say 8,000 BC to 1000 BC, roughly, because it is very difficult to decide the period of Rig Veda. It is the oldest extant work in world library, but it is 1000 years before Christian period, we can say, or Vikrama Samvat, we can say. So this is the first phase. The second phase starts around 1000 BC and continues up to 1st century, you can say. And the third phase runs from 1st century to 10th century. And the fourth phase runs from 10th century to 17th century to me. After that, a kind of modern period starts and the Britishers come, and there are various developments in knowledge systems, and the art of Avadhana also attains a specific character. So these are the 5 phases of the history and development of Avadhana in India. I will briefly explain them. I will try to come up to the 4th phase, which runs till 17th century, although it's a big spectrum that has to be covered. So the first phase beginning around, you can say, 8000 BC or even prior to that, and continuing up to 1000 BC, we see that there is a kind of exercise for preservation of knowledge systems, and that involves the practice of Avadhana. For example, the mantras of Rig Veda, 10,450 mantras approximately. So they are being preserved. The mantras are being seen. They are not being composed like we write some literary piece now. They are being seen. But after that, when they are seen, they are being remembered. And there is a sustained effort to remember the corpus of mantras. So the corpus ultimately included the whole Rig Veda, more than 10,000 mantras, then Yajurveda of a lesser extent, and then Atharvaveda and Samveda. So all these, the vast mass of Vedic Samhitas, riks, they are being remembered, and specific techniques are being evolved to memorize them exactly as they were seen. If they were seen in particular sounds, the sounds were also heard. So that system of sound, as it is known as Udatta, Anudatta, Swarit, the application of the pitch and three levels of it, you raise your pitch higher, bring it to low, and make it on a even plane. So the techniques of recitation of each mantra and the mantra and the anupurvi of that mantra, the exact order of the syllables in each and every mantra, that is being preserved. And that is being done without paper and pen, without any printing books. It is only in our oral tradition. So generation after generation, they are remembering this vast mass of mantras. You can say shlokas, because each mantra has 4 quarters, 4 lines. So they evolved eightfold way to preserve the mantra and its exact recitation method intact. So they are called Ashtavikritis. So Jata, Mala, Shikha, Lekha, Dhvajo, Dando, Ratho, Gana, Ashtavikritaya Prokta. These are the 8 kinds of vikritis or methods for reciting, which would lead to the memorization. So the techniques of memorization, and you won't miss a single sound and its way of correct pronunciation by these 8 vikritis. If you practice the mantra, so there are people who devoted whole of their life in memorizing the mantras, the vast corpus of thousands and thousands of mantras, exactly as they originally appeared, as they originally were seen. So they are called the vidhis of patha, you can say. So the first is pad patha and krama patha. In pad patha, we split the mantra in separate words. And in krama patha, 2 words taken together are repeated. Again, next 2 words, set of 2 words are repeated. And then in jata patha, that is the third vikrati, 3 times they would repeat a pair of 2 words. And then in this way, they will increase the order of number of repetitions. Repeat it 4 times, repeat it 5 times, and increase the number of words also. So a pair of words or 2 words are repeated twice, then 2 words are repeated thrice, then maybe 4 times, and then again more than 2 words are repeated twice, thrice. So these are the ways of memorizing, and in this way they could keep the various shakhas of Rigveda also as they were in the tradition. So it is recorded in the Mahabharata that there were 1130 shakhas of Rigveda. So, sorry, Samveda. So in different families, different shakhas were in practice, and each family, generation after generation, preserved that shakha. So all the 4 samhitas in their respective shakhas were preserved in this way. So this was an application of the method of Avadhana, and you can reproduce a text which is running, which is continuing with you for thousands of years, several thousand years, and it's an enormous text. So this was kind of this was a kind of a miracle that we could preserve such a vast mass of literature intact with the same method of recitation, without any violation of the order of even syllables, and that became a practice. And it was through the application of Avadhana that we could do this. There were some institutions in Vedic times who were contributing to these practices. They are called Charan and Parishad. They are defined in the tradition. So the group of seers, scholars who are engaged in memorizing and studying a particular shakha of a Vedic Samhita, that is called Charana. Charana Shabda Shakha Visheshadhyayana Paraikatapanna Janasangha Vachi. It's a community of scholars and learners and those who know Veda, who are preserving a particular shakha through this method. So all this is a practice of Avadhana, we can say. And another institution is Parishad. So Parishad also involves, Parishad is an assembly of scholars and logicians, grammarians, and Nairuktika, that is etymologists. They are members of it. And then the persons who know Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, they are also members of this Parishada. So these are the institutions where people are assembling and trying to preserve a knowledge system or a corpus of literature or the mantra literature, and sustained efforts are being made at that. Another thing about this Vedic period, which runs in the BC era, is that there is a quest for truth, and that leads to inquisitiveness. They are termed, these practices are termed as vichikitsa. Vichikitsa is kind of inquiry and doubt. So inquiry emerging out of doubts. So you are pursuing some search for a knowledge, and you ask questions. Questions are raised, and then answers are searched, or somebody gives the answers. So this practice, it's a kind of intellectual exercise, and later on it develops into an institution called Brahmodya. Brahmodya is assembly of philosophers and scholars who would be asking various puzzles about the creation, about life and life and birth of human being, and they will be discussing various issues. So these discussions continue. These discussions proceeded through questions and answers. That itself was an exercise of Avadhana type of practice. And we in Rig Veda and other Vedic Samhitas, we find instances of such an inquiry into various issues and search for answers, and answers being given. So this a kind of dialogue between various groups or persons, which happens to create an intellectual exercise. This is there in Vedic period. And in mantras, they say, who was that who created this universe? In Nasadi Supta, Yam Visashti, Katama Babuva, etc., how this creation was born. So this searching for answers, this is the spirit of quest and search for answers that is there, and that leads to the discussions between individuals, and that leads to the development of sabha in Vedic period. And these sabhas, various brahmodyas, group discussions between scholars are being held. So we find instances of such sabhas, particularly in Upanishads. If you go through the Upanishads, there are assemblies where philosophers and scholars are asking questions to each other, and they are full of very interesting spirit. They have a spirit for search for knowledge also. And like the Brahmodya or Shastra Sabha in the assembly of King Janaka, where Yagyavalkya entered into discussions with about 100 scholars or philosophers, and he said that either all of you ask me questions, or I will ask you questions. Ask me questions one by one, or put questions to me all together, and I will reply to them. So these were the methods in practice, and those persons who were practicing this, you can say the uh, a kind of the archaic form of Avadhana which prevailed in Vedic period. They were called Brahmavadins, Brahmagyanins or Brahmavadins. And this word occurs in Vedic Samhitas, in Atharvaveda, and in Upanishads also. Now we have instances of how these Brahmodhyas were conducted and what sort of questions and answers went in the assembly of Brahmodhya. So they are very interesting questions. Sometimes they are like puzzles. Who shines brighter than sun? Such question is asked. So they involve a kind of mental exercise. There are philosophical questions also. They are very witty questions also, and intellectual exercise goes on with them. But this question and answer between groups and a kind of performance, the whole Brahmodhya also becomes a kind of performance. So this institution of Brahmodhya, we can say that it is the earliest platform where the art of Avadhana, in that as it, without naming it Avadhana, it was, you can say, named as Brahmodhya. Brahma is knowledge, and Udya is to say, to speak, to tell out. So the knowledge systems are being explained or discussed. That is Brahmodhya. And these Brahmodhyas were held on several occasions. Even in Vedic yagyas, Brahmodhyas were organized. In Ashwamedh Yagya and Dasharatra Yagya, Brahmodhya forms invariable part of these sacrifices. And those who performed excellently in the Brahmodhya, they were honored with titles of Kavi and Vipra. So we have descriptions of these Brahmodhyas and the sort of discussions they will have. What is the ultimate truth, or what is the ultimate for the speech? Then the answer would be given by the other party that Parabrahma is the ultimate for the speech. And Shatapad Brahmana also prescribed the training methodology for Brahmodhya, how to participate in a Brahmodhya, how to frame right questions. And there were scholars or the novices or learners who wanted to be trained in the art of Brahmodhya, like the art of Avadhana nowadays. So it is almost like the same, almost the same exercise that you have to undergo a rigorous exercise. You have to train yourself and equip yourself with various knowledge systems, and you have to be creative as well to be able to perform in a proper way in a Brahmodhya. So Shatpat Brahmana describes Brahmodhyas and methodology to conduct them, and the experts who were great experts in the art of Brahmodhya during those times. Uddalaka is supposed to be one of the experts, and he used to train others. So these are references which we get. And the whole set of questions and answers which may be asked, the specimen of such questions and answers, they are also given. Some questions are based on numbers. Who is that is within the five? So 5 sense organs, you can say, and one soul that lives within that set of sense organs. And so these are the questions. Some questions are based on game of numbers. Some questions are based on various phenomena around, and those who posed questions were called Vadi, and those who responded, they were called Prativadi. And this was the Vedic period in the BC era, which continued through several millennia, you can say, several thousand years, till, as far as I can say, 1000 BC. And this was the first phase. And the second phase, which begins around 1000 BC and runs up to 1st century, you can say, we have more evidence of such activities which are precursors to modern Avadhana, we can say. So we find such evidences of such activities in Ramayana, Mahabharata, in Buddhist and Jain literature. And there are other text on knowledge systems like Kautilya's Arthashastra, Natyashastra, and Kam Sutra, where we find that rigorous intellectual activities are going on, and they involve various exercises which are very close to the practice of Avadhana as we find nowadays. So in Mahabharata, several shastrarthas are described, and they also evince the display or exhibition of Avadhana Vidya. In fact, this debate between Ashtavakra and Vandin in the court of Janaka is a wonderful specimen of Avadhana Vidya. And Ashtavakra, though he was deformed in his body, he was a great intellectual. He was disciple of Uddalaka. Uddalaka, who is known as one of the experts in Brahmodya, and he was a son of Kahoda, as Vedic says, and Shvetketu was his maternal uncle. Shvetketu is again a Vedic seer and great Upanishadic thinker. And we see that when Ashtavakra goes to the royal palace of Janaka to challenge the Vandi, who was supposed to be a great intellectual and he could defeat several philosophers of his time, and he defeated the father of Ashtavakra also. So to have his revenge, Ashtavakra went to challenge him. He appeared like a small boy, so they stopped him. You can't go inside. Then Ashtavakra started speaking. They asked him questions, what sort of questions they were asking him, and how he was replying. That displays the intellect of Ashtavakra. So those who were stopping him at the gate, finally they allowed him to enter, and he appeared before the king. And he addressed the king in this way: Chaturvinshati Parvatvam Shannabhi Dvadasha Pradhi Tat Trishashti Shaptarambay Chakram Patu Sadagati. May that wheel protect you, which has 24 joints, 6 axles, and 12 spokes, etc., and 360 movements. That cycle, that wheel may protect you. So in itself, it's a puzzle. And when Ashtavakra could speak in this way, Janaka could understand that he is something he is an extraordinary person, and only Janaka could understand the codes of the numbers which Ashtavakra was using. He was describing the cycle of time with 12 months and 6 seasons and 360 days, etc. And the whole wheel of time he was describing, and that time prevails, but let that time protect you. This was the blessing he gave to Janaka. So eventually, Janaka first entered into a kind of Avadhana exercise with Ashtavakra. And he asked him several questions. Very interesting questions they are. And you can also adopt these questions when you do a modern Avadhana. They're very witty questions, very intelligent questions, you can say. Kinsit suptam na nimishati. What is it that doesn't blink when it is sleep? What is it that doesn't close its eyelids when it is asleep? Or who is it that doesn't close his eyelids when it is asleep, when he is asleep? And kinsit jatam na chopati. Who is it that doesn't breathe after having born? Kasyasid hridayam nasti. Who is it which doesn't have a heart? Kimsit vegena vardate. Who is it that grows by speed? Four set of questions Janak asked him. Ashtavakra said, Matsya supto na nimishati. It is the fish which doesn't close its eyelids when it is asleep. And andam jatam nachopati. The egg, when it has come out, it has taken its birth, it doesn't breathe. And ashvano hridayam nasti, a stone doesn't have a heart, etc. And nadi vegena vardate, the river grows by speed. In this way, there are about 20 questions, or more than that, which Janaka asks, and Ashtavakra replies them in a very accurate manner. Then Janaka is very much pleased. He said that you are an extraordinary being. Natvam manne manusham. You are not an ordinary human being, and you are not a boy. You are a wise, mature person. Although he looked like a boy, he was a boy at that time. And Janaka then allowed him to enter into Avadhana, you can say, or a kind of debate with the greatest scholar in his assembly. And the sort of discussions they are having is a kind of game of numbers, and it's a intellectual exercise. And nothing otherwise very philosophical there. The numbers themselves involves a kind of philosophy. So the Bandi speaks things which are only one. He speaks about things which are only one. Okay. Ek eva agnir bahudha samidyate. There's only one fire which appears in many forms. Eka surya sarvamidam pravasate. Only one sun which gives light to the whole universe. So in this way, he describes a set of things which are only one. In reply to it, Ashtavakra replies citing the examples of pairs, that these things are two and two and two only. There are two Devarshis, Narada and Parvata. There are two gods, Ashwini Dvaya, they are always in pair. And there are husband and wife, they are also in pair. So he cites examples of things which go in pairs. In reply to it, Bandi cites examples of things which are in trinity, which are in triplicate. Then he would come with the giving the examples of the quadri pairs or things which are always in four. Then he will reply citing the examples of the things which are always five, like five sense organs or Panchamahabhutas. Or so it's a kind of long list of such pairs or combinations which are created out of numbers. And it's a interesting exercise which involves the whole cosmic view also. So eventually the Bandi reaches the number 13 because he started with uneven number. Sorry, he started with odd number 1. So the number 13 would come to him. And on 13, he couldn't complete the stanza. he couldn't complete the set of 13 things which are like this and like this and this. So he had to stop there. He couldn't complete. Then Ashtavakra came back to him and completed what was lacking in Bandin's enumeration of 13 things. In this way, Ashtavakra won. So this was a very interesting exercise. It was a mathematical exercise also. It was based on observation of the whole world, which is created out of numbers, several things which form a set of numbers, a game of numbers also, you can say. So this was exercise, and such exercises are reflected, are described in Mahabharata in several episodes, like Yaksha Yudhishthir Samvada. It's a very profound dialogue. Like Nahush Yudhishthir Samvada also, it's also a very profound dialogue. And it involves human wit and observation of the world and reading of the world, and very instructive also, these episodes we find. Then in Kam Sutra, when Vatsyayana describes 64 arts in the first book of his Kam Sutra, I think at least 10 out of the 64 arts are directly related to the art of Avadhana. 28th art is Prahelika, that is asking puzzles. Then 30th is Durvachaka Yoga, that is reciting stanzas difficult in pronunciation. So this is also an interesting exercise, that there are words which you cannot easily pronounce. Even in modern day games also, they give several such set of words. You can't pronounce them at a stage. Chacha ki chandni ne chandu ko chatai, something like that. And you can't repeat it in the same order. So that involves a kind of exercise in the memorization also, and your ability to pronounce correctly, accurately. So this exercise, according to Kam Sutra, is the art of Durvachaka Yoga. Reciting passages that are difficult in pronouncing. Then Pratimala is like modern day Antyakshari. It is the 29th art in the 64 arts. And Pratimala or Antyakshari involves playing with songs or verses, starting or ending with this with the same particular word. Then Samasya Purti. It's a very popular practice in Sanskrit tradition. You complete the stanza. 3 quarters are given and 4th quarter you add. So this involves a kind of creative activity also, understanding of poetry also, and your faculty to compose some stanza. So completing the incomplete poems or completing an incomplete stanza, that is 33rd art, Kavisamasya Purnam. And this Prahelika continued to develop into a very interesting genre, and several passages after passages we find which form the Prahelika or puzzles. And Sanskrit gives several literary texts which are created out of Prahelika itself. I will come to it when we come to the third phase. Then 45th art in Vatsyayana's list of 64 arts is Akshar Mushtika Kathanam, decoding the code words. First letter is given and you identify the complete word. Such exercise is there, Akshar Mushtika. And code language, to decoding the code word, that is Akshar Mushtika Kathanam. And deciphering the code language, that is Mrechita Vikalpa. That is 46th art. And Desh Bhasha Gyanam, of course, knowledge of regional languages. Vasyayana says that one should know, besides Sanskrit and Prakrit, other languages also. There are several languages in practice in this country, and one should know various languages. to converse with various groups of people and to enrich yourself, to increase your vocabulary. And Dharan Matrika, this is also very interesting. It is 51st. So Dharan Matrika means capability of repeating a passage verbatim after once hearing it. In later tradition, a person who could do it was called Ekashruti. He hears a long passage only once and he can reproduce it exactly in the same order of words as he heard it. This is Dharana Matrika. This is also a kind of remarkable display of the intellect or intellectual capacity. And about this game, Akshar Mushtika, how these code words were found. Yashodhara, the commentator of Kam Sutra, gives some information about it, and he cites some examples also, that how the Akshar Mushtikas will be framed. If you are to talk about 12 months, you can say Pa, Chai, Vai, Je, A, Sha, Bha, A, Ka, Ma, Phau, Pha. So the person should be able to know what these first letters of a particular word would mean. Falgun, Chaitra, Vaishak, Jeshta, Shad, etc., etc. So they will say Pha, Chai, Vai, Je, etc. Like average forms of various organizations like UNO. So for several such concepts, they had these code words, code language, and the game of decoding them, that also was in practice. Then 52nd art of the 64 arts is Sampathyam. That also is capability of reciting a stanza perfectly well. And Manasi Kavikriya, that is 53rd, that involves making a stanza out of unconnected words. Only some loose words are given and you imply them in an stanza. This also I have seen Shatavdhani and other Ashtavdhanis, they do it, that you give them some words, some unconnected words you give them. Rama, Nala, Harishchandra, and you compose a stanza where all these words occur and there should be a connectivity. So this is Mansi Kavikriya according to Kama Sutra. Then there are several other arts which supplement the Avadhana practices, like Abhidhana Kosha, remembering the lexicons, Chandogyanam, practice of prosody, Chanda Shastra, and Kriya Kalpa, knowledge of poetics. All these 64 arts, you see, they are very much connected with the ancient form of Avadhana practices. And this was about Kama Sutra. And we have a particular genre in this second phase, which runs from 1000 BC to 1st century. That is composing poetry to illustrate a Shastric concept. Composing some stanza to illustrate, you can say, a philosophical concept or a grammatical concept. So Patanjali gives examples of such compositions, that this is a grammatical category and somebody has composed a stanza in Anushtup to illustrate it, like the illustration of Saptami Vibhakti. So almost a poetic stanza is written by somebody, composed by somebody to illustrate the use of rules of Saptami Vibhakti. So the grammatical rules, they are exemplified by composing instantly some stanza. This was also the practice, and Patanjali cites such stanzas. Charmani Dvipinam Hanti Dantayor Hanti Kunjaram. Kesheshu Chamari Manti, Chimni Pushkala Kohata. This stanza is very famous amongst the students and teachers of Sanskrit Vyakarana. So for this purpose, this act is done. So seventh case, Saptami Bhakti will be used in this context. And somebody has composed a 4-line stanza to specify this particular rule. Then in Natya Shastra, there are several places where we find that rigorous intellectual activity is going on. Even when Bharat Muni talks about theater and poetry and drama, there's a kind of intellectual exercise going on, because it is not like English romantic poetry that only emotions are there. Knowledge systems are also there. So Bharat Muni says that Nata Jnanam, Nata Chilpam, Nasa Vidya, Nasa Kala, Naso Yogo Tat Karma Natyasmin Yanna Drashyate. There is no knowledge systems, no Vidya, no art, no combination which doesn't form a part of this Natya or theater. So various intellectual systems, knowledge systems would be very much linked to, would be very much assimilated to the practice of theater, the art of theater also. Natya Shastra, which was produced around 3rd century BC, records several such practices, particularly some of genres of poetry like Yamaka Kavya. So Bharat Muni in the 16th chapter of Natya Shastra gives a detailed discussion on Yamaka Kavya, and he gives as many as 9 types of Yamaka Kavya. Yamaka is based on repetitions of words and syllables and varnas, letters. So Padanta Yamaka, the same word is repeated at the end of each quarter, each pada, that is Padanta Yamaka. The same word, repetition of it forms like a girdle, mekhla, that would form the Kanchi Yamaka. So in this way, very beautiful stanzas are composed. It became a challenge how to use this word in repetitions, where that word would be repeated again and again to form a particular pattern, a particular figurative poetry. So this exercise is there in the 3rd century BC or prior to that, when Natya Shastra describes these varieties of Yamaka, Alankara. And he cites very interesting examples also there. Dinak Kshayat Samhrata Rashmi Mandalam, Diviva Lagnam Tapaniya Mandalam, Vibhati Tamram Divi Surya Mandalam, Yatha Tarunya Stanabhar Mandalam. So the word mandala occurring in different contexts at the end of each line and describing various images. So this created a kind of charm also, attraction in poetry, and it added to the beauty also. But you need to have a very good knowledge of language and grammar and lexicons to be able to compose Yamak Kavya. So very complicated examples are also there of Yamaka, Alankara. This is about Natya Shastra. And coming to Buddhist literature, because in the second phase, Jainism and Buddhism, they flourish. And there is a text, Lalita Vistara, which gives a biography of Buddha. And Lalita Vistara describes how Prince Siddhartha was undergoing through various tests, through various intellectual texts. So several princes confront him with various questions, and he replies to all of them one by one. Then 500 princes all together, they ask him 500 questions, and he replies to them one by one in the same order. This is, you can say that, the most, you can say, oldest record of Avadhana. And Siddhartha, who became Gautam Buddha later on, is said to be displaying the art of Avadhana in that way. So it is, of course, there it is called pariksha. After finishing the studies, the prince has to undergo through a pariksha. And in this pariksha, he has to undergo a rigorous testing and he has to replies. He has to reply to so many questions. So one of the questions which is posed before him by the astrologer Raj Jyotishi, it is about the numbers. He asked him whether you know the number Shatkoti, 100 crores. Then whether you know the numbers next to Shatkoti, next to 100 crores. And Bodhisattva says that, yes, I know numbers next to Shatakoti or 100 crores. Then he enumerates a big list of such numbers which come after 100 crores. Shatkoti is Ayuta, Shat Ayut is Niyuta, Shat Niyut is Kankar, Shat Kankar is Nivar. Evidently, he reaches the number where 0 occurs 22 times. No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. Ayuta. Ayuta, that is 100 crore. 100 crore is multiplied by 22. And then multiplied by 100. He reaches that number. He said that I know that number also. So this was mathematics and kind of mathematical exercise. So we find a specimen of several such exercises, different kind of exercises, intellectual exercises also, you can say, or how a ordinary question can be put up to a threadbare analysis. For example, there is a text Milinda Panho. In Milinda Panho, there is a great philosopher Bhikshu Nagsen, and he is asked why you have shaved your head, Mundit Mastak, why you are like that. So he gives 16 reasons for having his head clean shaved, and the reasons are very pertinent, of course, but they also bring out a kind of common sense that I find it more convenient and better for my life that I'm skin-headed, I'm Mundit Mastaka, and such dialogues, questions, queries, beginning from very ordinary question to very higher type of intellectual discussions, they continue in this second phase, which runs between 1000 BC to 1st century. We come to the third phase, which is 1st century to 10th century. In this period, there are great poets. They are writing epic poems, and their epic poems involve specimen of several such genres which are very close to modern day Avadhana compositions, repetition of the same letter, or this is Chitra Kavya, the poetry creating some kind of image. You can put the words of a particular stanza in a picture. So there are genres which cater for such exercises. There is a poem, Kichak Vadham, produced in 9th century. So the whole Kichak Vadham is a Yamak Kavya. Each and every stanza has specifies the Yamaka Kavya, repetition of words in a particular order. And such practices in literary scenario, they are increasing, and great poets are writing this kind of poetry. And in later Buddhist literature also, we find that such intellectual activities and exercises, they are being promoted. And in all the schools of Buddhism, such exercise, they continue. Even in Jain, which developed in Japan from China, Zen, Zen, there also they have such questions and answer, and very intricate questions, set of questions the teacher would ask his disciple. So Lalita Vistara describes several scripts, and many of the scripts are very unusual, like Chitralipi, Garuda Lipi, Magchakra Lipi, Shastravarta Lipi, Gananavarta Lipi. So several such scripts are described, and practicing these scripts, the methods of writing and creating visuals through them, or particular structures through them. This also was an exercise which became popular. And poets like Bharavi, Magha, they created such stanzas in their epic poems, which furnished examples of Avadhana exercise, we can say. So it will take a lot of time if I go on citing examples from the poems. I will move to the fourth phase, which starts from 10th century and continues up to 17th century. And it is in this period that the word Avadhanam is specifically used in the context we are using Avadhana today. And in the 12th century, in one of the inscriptions of Dev Sharma, in one of these inscriptions from Karnataka, one Dev Sharma has been described, and he used to perform Ashtavadhanam, the inscription says. And there is a reference to one poet, Kama, who flourished in 1200 AD, and he documented Ashtavadhanam for the first time. So now we find in 11th, 12th century, we find the use of word Avadhanam. The absence of the word Avadhanam doesn't mean that the art of Avadhanam is not there. It is there. The practice is there. The name has been used, came in use at a later period, but under different names, the practice of Avadhana is continuing through all the three phases I have talked about. But in this fourth phase, which begins from 10th century onwards, the word Avadhanam, in the sense we are using it today, it occurs, and the Ashtavadhana practice is also described in the inscription. Then there are poets who are displaying the art of Avadhana themselves. There was a great poetess, Madhurvani. He wrote an epic poem on this story of Rama, Ramayana Mahakavya, and she is described as Shatavadhanini. She was a lady scholar, and she could perform Shatavadhana. And there are other poets in the king's court who are Ghatika Shataka. They would compose 100 stanzas within an hour. So they are called Ghatika Shataka. And this title is given, even till recent times, this title was given to great scholars and poets in Sanskrit who could compose 100 stanzas within 1 hour or one Ghatika. So in this fourth phase, running from 10th century up to 17th century, Chitrakavyas came into more and more practice, and there are several texts which furnish the examples of Chitrakavya, figurative poetry or poetry creating some kind of image and some kind of spectacular scene it would create. So there is a text, Vidagdha Mukhamandan, by Dharmadasa, a 16th century text. So the whole text is composed to display various practices of Avadhana. The puzzles are also there, and several knowledge systems are also included, and Samasya Purtis are also included. So it's a kind of a small encyclopedia for recording the Avadhana practices in 16th century. And several examples of puzzles I have had, Prahelika Kavya, they are very interesting. They are entertaining also, and they are intellectual exercises. So I will not go into the details of, they are very popular also. Those who are students of Sanskrit, they often cite them. And then there is a particular genre which develops during this period after 10th century, that you write a poem which simultaneously takes two themes. So the same stanza would describe Rama's story and Mahabharata story. So the whole work would narrate Ramayana story as well and Mahabharata story also. Each and every stanza would yield two meanings, one in the context of Rama and one in the context of Yudhishthira or Draupadi, etc., etc. So there is a larger number of such poems. They are called Sandhana Kavyas. So the Sandhana Kavyas, one poem having two stories running through the same text, through the same stanza one by one, and one poem having three stories, Rama, Nala Damayanti, and Mahabharata. Such poems are also written. Then up to Sapta Sandhana Kavyas, that each and every stanza of that whole epic poem would yield seven meanings in seven different contexts. So this Sandhana Kavya genre, which developed, it was a remarkable exercise in language, and Sanskrit language particularly was developed. It became so perspicuous, and its capability to produce various shades of meanings, that was utilized through this genre. And in the 16th century, we find several Jain munis who are practicing the art of Avadhana. And Akbar, this Emperor Akbar, had very close contact with these Jain munis. Of course, with several scholars of Vedic tradition also, he had contacts. They visited his courts. He patronized them, and he had established an institution, Ibadat Khana. So in the Ibadat Khana, scholars were discussing various issues, philosophical issues, throughout the day and night. It was always open, and Akbar used to sit in it and to listen to the deliberations himself. He participated in these deliberations, but particularly the Jain Munis, he had a high regard for them. And there was one Muni, Hir Vijay, who used to be regarded as a great saintly figure amongst the Jain Munis, and Akbar came into very close contact with him. Even Rana Pratap knew Hir Vijay Muni, and he had a high regard for Hir Vijay Muni. But Hir Vijay Muni himself visited the court of Akbar, and Akbar gave him the status of a state guest and honored him. And Bhanuchandra Gani was a disciple. So these Jain Munis were great scholars also. And some of the Jain Munis were displaying the art of Avadhana before Akbar. And one of them was Shanti Chandra, Muni Shanti Chandra. He was also a disciple of Muni Hir Chandra. So Shanti Chandra would perform Ashtavadhana and Shatavadhana. And Akbar appreciated the art of Avadhana. He came to love this remarkable display of language and creativity. And there was an occasion when it is recorded in Jaina text that Muni Shanti Chandra performed Ashtottar Shatavadhana before Akbar. And not only Shatavadhana, it is Ashtottar Shatavadhana, that is 108 Shatavadhana type, 108 Avadhana before Akbar. And there was one Sundar Gani, who was the disciple of Jinchandra Suri. He was also honored by Akbar. And in the presence of Akbar, the assembly of scholars was being conducted, and this Sundar Gani made 10 lakh meanings out of a maximum of 8 syllables. Out of a sentence containing only 8 syllables. He said that it can yield into 10 lakh meanings. And he could logically prove that 10 sets of meanings would come, 100 sets of meanings would come this way, and 1000 set of meanings would come this way. In this way, he could prove that this small sutra of 8 syllables can yield as many as 10 lakh contexts. So this was a great Herculean intellectual exercise, and Akbar was enthralled by it. So this was 16th, 17th century, and great poets. Now there is another genre in Indian literature in 15th, 16th centuries, that is Bhasha Samakavya. You write a stanza in 3 or 4 languages. One line in Sanskrit, one line in Persian, one line in Urdu, one line in Braj Bhasha or Hindi. So Rahim is a great poet, one of the greatest poet and a living legend also, Abdul Rahim Khan Khana. And he has written several such stanzas. He was a scholar of Sanskrit. He has written in Sanskrit, remarkable poetry he has written in Sanskrit, and a work on astrology, astronomy also he has written in Sanskrit. Beautiful poetry he writes in Sanskrit and Braj Bhasha and Urdu and Persian also. He's a master of prosody, Chanda Shastra also. So he created a kind of genre that, since we are living in a multilingual space, several languages are in practice. So we will create a genre where each stanza contains several languages. So एकस्मिन् दिवसे प्रभात समये मैं था गया बाग में काचित तत्र कुरंग शाव नयना गुल तोड़ती थी खड़ी. This is Shardul Vikritic Chandas of Sanskrit, but a part of the first line is in Sanskrit. The second part of the same line is in Hindustani, Hindavi, and again a part of second line is in Sanskrit. Next part is in Urdu. Then in this way he continues, mixing of the languages. It was a challenge and very interesting exercise also. So I will end here. This was the fourth phase, running up to 17th century. And in this way, the art of Avadhana had a long cherished tradition in India, which further grows during the period from 18th to 21st century. About that, I am not talking. And I will end my talk here. Thank you very much.